Hey everyone, Tin Man here, and today we've got a guide for Jull, the Ice Rack Bootlegger, also the latest Underlord to be added to Dota Underlords. In this guide, we're going to cover the general strategy of playing Jull, the different build choices that are available, both aggressive tank and healing tank, when to pick either of those two, and of course positioning considerations for each. But first though, this update has adjusted how Underlords work in general. Previously, the Underlords were selected before the game, and they each had a set of baseline abilities that would be modified with talent choices every 5 rounds. Under this new system, Underlords will be selected on round 10 and come equipped with one of 2 different builds. You don't need to select any more talents outside of this one turn. You'll have a choice of a Nesix, Jull, or Hobgin, and each one will have one of their 2 talent builds randomly available. Each Underlord will have one active ability that will be modified by this build, and then one ultimate ability which is unique to this build. This makes each of the Underlords and builds a bit more specialized and a little bit less cumbersome to use properly. So the general strategy for Jull is that he is a tanky, frontline kind of Underlord thanks to his passive ability, which grants him +5 armor per adjacent enemy. And of course he has a melee range attack. This is in stark contrast with Hobgin and Nesix, who both prefer to be protected in the backline. He's best used with a central positioning and is also very strong against opposing melee compositions for reasons we'll discuss shortly. His ultimate ability, regardless of which build you pick, is good utility for your entire team. He's best when paired up with assassins, who often need an additional tank or frontline unit to buy time for the assassins to do their work. And if you pick the healing tank build, he's also very good with warriors, warlocks, and healers who really want that additional healing output to really take advantage of that effect. He's best against opposing assassins as well, and really any kind of melee lineup, such as warriors, brutes, and knights, because of his Shake It Off ability. Now, Shake It Off is the baseline ability that he'll always have, regardless of which build you pick, and it says that Jull will reflect 50% of the melee damage taken back to all adjacent enemy units, and then heal for 30% of melee damage and 15% of the range damage that he's taken over the last 5 seconds. This ability will be cast every 10 seconds on cooldown, but at the start of the fight, it starts on a 5-second cooldown, so he'll cast this 5 seconds into the fight. If you do pick the aggressive tank build, Jull will instead reflect 100% of the melee damage, up from 50% of the melee damage, but this damage that is reflected is now dealt to the units over 8 seconds, rather than instantly like the baseline version of Shake It Off. The healing amount from the 30% of melee and 15% of ranged is still identical. If you pick the aggressive tank build, you also get the Barrels of Fun ultimate, which is a really fun ability to watch on the board. He'll call in barrels from the edges and roll down random rows and columns. If these barrels hit allies, then that ally will gain some attack speed. And if they hit an enemy, that enemy will take some physical damage and receive more damage over the course of the rest of the fight. So when do you want to pick this aggressive tank build? Well, he's very strong against the opposing melee lineups like assassins, who are going to be dealing high amounts of physical damage. So if they get onto Jull and then he reflects that damage, those assassins are going to go down really quickly and you really turn their strength against them. He's also very good with backline DPS, who could use the attack speed from Barrels of Fun, something like Dragon Knight or perhaps Hunters, who scale very well with attack speed. Or if your build just needs another frontliner, it doesn't matter what kind of build you got, if you just need somebody else on the front line, the aggressive tank build is a very good option. In terms of positioning consideration with the aggressive tank build, you generally want to put him up front and in center, and sometimes you may even want to put him alone on the front line, like in this example, where the rest of your melee units are kind of spread out behind him. This will ensure that most opponents attack Jull first as their initial target, and that will really maximize his first cast of Shake It Off so that it can deal a lot of damage right away at the start of the fight. This is risky though. Of course, if your opponent has too much damage output, they could burst down Jull before he really gets going. So I just be a little bit wary of this if your opponent has a lot of damage, or if you get into the later stages of the game, you might want to have somebody up right adjacent to him to kind of split the targeting aggro initially. The other option, of course, is the healing tank build. You still have the same baseline Shake It Off ability, but instead it gets modified by Righteous Healing. He is still going to reflect the 50% of melee damage back, but whenever he heals himself, he also heals adjacent allies for the same amount. And that is a really powerful effect. So if he's right in the middle of the fight, you've got guys on either side of him, or maybe your ranged units behind, they're going to heal a whole lot because of this healing tank ability. His ultimate in this form is Happy Hour, where he'll buy a round of drinks for all members of your army, and when taking damage for the rest of the fight, only 30% of that damage will be received immediately, and then the rest will be taken over 7 seconds. So you'll take a little bit initially, and then kind of this damage over time effect will get applied to you, and that'll continue to stack up as you take more damage. But it really smooths out the damage profile. Your units are going to take damage very steadily, rather than huge bursts of damage from, say, a big spell cast or a big crit or something like that. This really plays into the strength of healing effects, as if you're taking damage slowly and over time, you have more time for the healing to catch up with you and to keep you topped off before, dropping down to a big burst of damage. When do you want to pick the healing tank build? Well, he pairs very well with healers and warlocks who really want to do additional healing and can take advantage of his ultimate. If you get more time that's staying alive, you have a lot more time to heal up that damage rather than just getting burst down. It's also very good with something like the Warriors or perhaps Knights Alliance, who have some damage reduction, either additional armor or flat damage reduction, because that means that every point of healing is just that much more effective on your units who are very tanky naturally. It's also very good with your own melee heavy build, because you want units adjacent to Jull up in the front line to get advantage from that healing tank build and that Shake It Off Righteous Healing modification. And it's also quite good against opposing Warriors and Knights as opposed to, say, Assassins, because Warriors and Knights will generally deal a little bit lower damage output, and that'll give you more time to have your healing kick in, whereas the Assassins are going to be critting and reducing your healing and kind of bursting you down. So this healing tank build is better against a little bit lower damage output opponents. The positioning for healing tank build is still front and center for Jull, but you'll often want to kind of stack units around him a little bit tighter. You don't want him to be taking too much of the damage right away, and you want melee units adjacent to him, and even if you have ranged units, like in this example, we've got Enchantress positioned directly behind him so that she can get healed up too, because he heals all adjacent allies, even ones who are directly behind him. The one last positioning consideration is if your opponent has a Jull, what do you want to do to try to counter that? Well, Jull is at his best whenever the opponents are lined up directly across from him, so to counter it, you really want to set yourself back off the line, or just like completely backline positioning, as we see in this example. This will cause the fight to be a little bit chaotic. Your units are going to move forward, their units are going to move forward, they might target a little bit randomly and move left and right, and this will hopefully prevent Jull from getting adjacent to too many of your own units, and that'll really reduce his healing output or his bonus armor from his passive as well. So, in conclusion, Jull here is the best Underlord with and against opposing melee units. He may not be the best overall, but he's quite strong in certain situations. And of course, the Underlord choice that you pick is always very contextual based on your build, your opponent's build, and then what talent tree you have offered. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this, please do like and subscribe. And you can also follow me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/tinman354, where I stream Underlords almost every day. And I want to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters. If you like this kind of content and want to see it keep coming, you can support me over on patreon.com/tinman354. And of course, patrons always get early access to guides such as this one. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you next time.